Good afternoon, and welcome to the best educational podcast around, the Educational Dialogue. We are always happy to have you join us as we provide a space where knowledge and strategies are shared to help you navigate and thrive in the world of education. I am Karen Paysinger.
And I am Dr. Sharice Roper.
Please also remember to like and subscribe as you view us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Educational Dialogue.
Well, good afternoon and glad to have you with us. As you may remember from our first podcast, we talked about concerns we had regarding tuition increases for students who hope to attend Cal State University campuses beginning in the 2024-25 school year. You may also recall hearing about students and families protesting about these upcoming tuition increases. Well, last week on September 13th, the California State University Board of Trustees approved those increases in tuition with the goal of using a multi-year revenue sustainability plan for a system-wide tuition, non-resident tuition, and the graduate business professional program. So what I found out was that the tuition rate for California residents is currently for a full-time student, $5,742. And in the next year, it will be raised by $342, equating to the amount of $6,084 for a full-time student per semester. And while I was also doing my research, I also found out that about 80% of students who attend Cal State's do receive some form of financial aid. So the chances are that students who are admitted will have an opportunity of some type to have some financial assistance. Please also be reminded, though, that community college is an option, especially for those students who really believe that they may be able to move forward, transfer their units, and all of those kinds of things. In future episodes, we'll talk a little bit more about how to make sure that you are financially secure when trying to look for college and attending those colleges in California and outside of California. We'll also talk about later those opportunities for those of you who feel like college may not be an option or something you're not interested in, but you're really interested in more of a specific kind of entrepreneurship or something like that, and how you can go about getting those funds to meet your needs. Now, as we move into the topic for today's episode, because we just always want to keep you notified of those things that we learn of. As we move into today's episode, we'll continue our conversation surrounding classroom management and meeting students' unique behavioral needs. This also includes addressing social, emotional development with students.
So before I talk a little bit about social emotional development, I just also wanted to say, in terms of community colleges, I know for many people, community college is not, in their mind, is not an option. You know, some people feel like community colleges are kind of, you know, at the lower end of college. But like you said, Dr. Reese, it is really a cost-efficient way to get all of your general education courses, a way to get those general education courses completed. And I want to remind our audience that students can take these GEs while they are in high school.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So if you're taking these GEs while you're in high school, oftentimes students graduate with their high school diploma as well as their AA degree and can move on into a four-year university as a junior, as a third-year student. So community college is definitely a cost-effective option for many of those who are considering moving on to college. And I know we were talking about our Cal States, but I know UCLA, many of our UCs, especially UCLA and USC, recommend that students go to a two-year college first because it's easier to be admitted as a junior as opposed to a freshman. So that's a tip.
Yes. And I remember meeting with my financial advisor when my children were young, and she said the same thing, that she had sent her children to community college first and then they transferred later. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, it makes sense. You know, with the rising cost of college these days, we have to maximize all of our money.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about social emotional development. Those let's talk a bit about the social emotional needs of our students. And so I think it's important for our audience to know what social emotional learning is. During conversations that I've had with people who are not educated, sometimes I get the impression that they feel like we just pull concepts and strategies or whatever out of the hat without any type of thought process. It's just something new that we're just throwing up against the wall to see if it sticks. But despite what many think, you know, there is research behind everything that we do in education. So, socially emotional learning, or SEL, as you may hear, is an approach that focuses on educating learners to successfully comprehend their emotions, feel them, and follow the right course. In other words, social emotional learning can mean becoming more aware of your feelings, how to control them, how to gain interpersonal skills to deal with them. And these skills are essential in handling school, in the work environment, and just all around life, making your success as a person, as a human being, easy. So now, there are 5 concepts to social emotional learning, and these concepts are self-awareness, self-management, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So
you
I
forgot
think
one more, Karen, social awareness.
Socially aware, I'm sorry,
as
self-awareness,
yes.
self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we all can agree that these concepts are valuable in navigating as we navigate through life. So I know we all know someone, whether it be a friend or family member or colleague, who needs to improve their skill set when it comes to one or more of these concepts. So I hear someone thinking in our audience, and I know someone is asking, well, what does this have to do with learning, and why is it important? I know some of you asked that question.
Right.
So it's important because whether some of us like it or not, our schools are increasingly becoming multicultural and multilingual with students from diverse social and economic backgrounds. And so educators serve these students and know that they are motivated differently, engaging them in their learning on how to behave positively, how to perform academically. So SEL provides a foundation that provides a safe and positive learning environment. It enhances our students to abilities to succeed in school, in career, and in life. It features some of the life skills that our students will manage through their everyday daily goings on. And yeah, so now out of the five concepts, me personally, I think the most important is self-awareness. And so self-awareness enables us to understand ourselves, how to form good relationships, and how to take responsibility for your actions. It also helps us to build confidence in everything that we do. So, you know, these are life skills that we're teaching our students as part of our curriculum that is really, really important.
Absolutely. And you know, when we think about where we are as a society, there is so much that we have and what that we do that really where you need to be self-aware and you need to have those relationship skills.
Yeah.
Everything that we do is in a group or with, you know, folks, or communicating online, right? Where everybody can see and all of those things. So those things are important, I think, for all of us, regardless of where we are in our stages of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so have you heard there are many factors to consider when trying to help our students, and helping them to build decision-making skills is critical. Now, I believe decision-making is one of the biggest areas that students, we need all the other things that we talked about, but when we don't make healthy decisions, you know, often it reflects not only what is happening with us and those around us, but it's like a domino effect, right?
Right, right.
And so as educators, it's important that we teach these skills, as well as being parents. As much as we want to help students with every step that they take along the way to learning, we also have to allow them experiences that they go through with in terms of trial and error. We don't want our kids to make any mistakes. We don't want them to look like, you know, they don't know. Well, learning comes from making those mistakes.
Absolutely.
Right? When we think about, I always think about Michael Jordan, and, you know, everybody knows the story that when he tried out for, you know, his basketball team, he didn't make it in the beginning, but he didn't stop. He continued to, you know, to learn and to build on the skills that he already had. And I think that this is important for students today, that we allow them the space to learn. We learn by doing. If we really think about how we have learned a skill, most of the time it is by doing it. I know that, I'm just going to use the analogy baking a cake. I know that I can use the box and read the directions, but I still have to do something, right? I have to do, and I read the directions, I follow the directions, and then I make some adjustments because maybe my oven gets too hot. And so if I leave it in at the time that they have suggested, it would be burnt by the time I take it out. So, all of those things are important with our children as parents, as well as educators.
Absolutely.
Now, I recently read an article by Carla Shalaby, and it's in a magazine called Educational Leadership. And she stated that instead of assigning blame to students and families, which is what educators typically do if children are not progressing,
Mm-hmm.
then educators must understand challenging behavior as a collective public health reality.
Wow, novel concept, but so true.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just as we have mentioned, in the past, students and educators come to school having experience. We mentioned this last time. They've experienced trauma. We all have trauma of some type. And we probably can agree that much of this is societally based. Let's think about it. What are all of the circumstances that we are still dealing with post-pandemic? Right? Let's think about that. Children are experiencing the same anxieties that we are experiencing due to things like, for me, I'm like, okay, enough already with the people driving crazy.
Right. Right.
You know, when everything was all closed down, people could just drive as fast as they wanted to on the freeway because nobody else was on there. But now I think that they think that it's still, you know, they can still do that, and that is not the case. So we're all anxious about the people that are driving around us who have forgotten that that is not really what we need to do to ensure all of our safeties, right?
Right.
And then what about things like climate change? We had, was it a tornado just recently that brought
Hurricane Hillary?
The hurricane, yes,
Hurricane Hillary.
Sorry. But we weren't used to that. And then in the middle of that, we also had an earthquake.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So just think about the anxiety that children may feel coming to school, thinking about, you know, oh my gosh, if there were another earthquake and I was at school, is my school safe for me? Will my parents be able to come and get me? You know, just those kinds of things that are just societal. And then what about gun violence? You know, we could go on and on about, you know, what we've seen in the past about with regards to gun violence and children. So all of these things are things that our children are coming to school with, these traumas, and we have to create environments that help them to feel safe. It is my belief that we cannot change the societal emotional trajectory within our classrooms and schools without working closely together. Communities have to work together. The parents, the teachers, the administrators, you know, it's time for us to realize that no longer do we just send our kids to school and let them take care of it and then they send them home educated. We've got to all get in there together and figure out how we can change the trajectory of, you know, the educational system.
Yeah, without a doubt. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you shared. And, you know, if we don't address the social emotional needs of our students, how can we expect them to learn what we're trying to teach them? Because they can't. There's, you know, there's all this other stuff that's in the way. And so, you know, when you have, I just know when I was teaching, I had a 4-5 combo, and I had one of my students, she was a 5th grader, and she was just constantly acting out and being disruptive. And I mean, it was major. And so, you know, one day I just, you know, I decided, let's have lunch together. And, you know, initially she was kind of apprehensive, but then, you know, she kind of loosened up and we just kind of started talking. And so just from that 40-minute lunch, I found out that there was a lot going on in her home. And so she was acting out because of what was happening at home that, you know, she saw, but, you know, at her age, she really couldn't process, and she felt like she didn't have anybody to talk to.
Mhm.
And so, that was something that was ongoing for me. We decided that I would do a check-in. I would check in with her every day, but once a week we would kind of do a little weekly check-in just to see how she's doing. And her behavior, she improved. I mean, it wasn't the best, but it was better. But
Yes.
but that's something that I had to do in order to ensure that she was able to learn what I was trying to teach, as well as the rest of the class. And
Mhm.
so it's, this is something that we can't ignore. And
Right.
so it is very much needed in our society. I also think about the quote unquote Karens. And sidebar, I don't know how they came up with the name Karen. I don't like that. I'm like, why Karen?
Right, right,
But
right.
but anyway, I think about the Karens and how they behave. And some of their actions are based around entitlement, but their behavior, I feel, is just a lack of self-management, a lack of of social awareness, and just responsible decision making.
Right,
They're just being impulsive and not really thinking about, probably not really thinking. It's just stuff that's happening in the moment.
right,
So,
right.
I totally agree with Carla Shalabi.
Yes, yes, yes. And and to your point, about those Karens, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
it has to also, also deals with the inability to really think outside of the box that they're in,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that we live in a country where we have a variety of different cultures and just a way of doing things, that we all do things differently. One of the things I try to instill in my students, is that we're not all the same, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay to be different. In fact, our differences are the things that make us so special,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
then if we could recognize that and not be afraid, there's so many things that I think people are afraid of.
Yes, agreed.
When we think about all of the bans that are going forward now and against everything, a lot of it is really just underlying fear.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could get past being afraid that somebody might do it a little better or different, that somebody might know it a little bit, better, then and really recognize that we all have something that we can add. Most of the time, that when I find, from my experiences, especially as a principal, when we had children that were not getting along with each other, a lot of it stemmed from a place of not knowing the other person and being afraid of something that they thought they were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he was going to take the ball, or she didn't want me to have this. It's like, okay, so how do we make the decision to play together in a way that supports everyone, right? And not
Mm-hmm.
being afraid that he's going to have, she's going to have, all of those kinds of things. And so one of the things that Carla also said from that article was that I pulled out, there were 5 key factors, but I'm going to share only 2. And those are around protecting each other and realizing that it's our responsibility to keep all of us safe.
Mm-hmm.
When we in our country have had big, let's say, we just went over 9/11. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I'm looking at some of the footage of some of the things, how everybody band together
Yes.
in that
Yes.
time period, right? And
Yes.
so it's so interesting that we do that for a minute. And then when things seem to have died down, we go back to where we were. No one was concerned about the color of anyone's skin,
Mm-hmm.
the race, or any of those kinds of
Mm-hmm. We
things.
all were Americans.
That's right. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. And the same is true if in education, if this is what we want for our world, then we have to be willing to intentionally teach towards that and provide strategies and supports that will make this true. So I remember also as a principal, one of my principalships, I remember getting to the school and thinking to myself after meeting folks and everything, it was a school that had a community side, and then it's a community school, I should say. And within that community, there was a magnet program as well. And the more I got to know the school, the more I realized that the school was operating from a haves and a have-nots standpoint. The children who were in the magnet program, smaller numbers, they had to apply to get there. There was this kind of privilege that they felt that they deserved because they were in this particular group. And then, and when I say that, I mean that there were certain things that were just given to those particular classrooms of students that were not allowed to take place with the other students within the regular community school. So the first thing I did was I said, I called a meeting with my staff and I said, we will not operate this way. Let's look at what this is and let's look at how the children are behaving on the yard. Much of the behavior situations that we were getting into had to do with many of those students from one side or the other side, that, across the tracks kind of thing, right? And we had to be intentional about changing the way that we were doing things. We couldn't have just the books. There was a closet that had books for only the magnet children. And so it was like, no. Why is it that the other children are not able to read those books as well, right?
Right.
And so when we think about, for me, when I think about these behavior problems and these social emotional development, I think a lot of it starts with how we as adults are providing an environment that supports what it is that we hope to see. I hope that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense because, I'm listening to you, listening to your example, and I'm thinking to myself, why did the teachers think, and honestly, I'm not even going to say just the teachers, the previous administrators, because it had to happen on their watch. So why did they think that it was okay for that separation to happen? They clearly had to see that there was a difference, and that the students in the community school, I'm quite sure, felt different. So, yes. I don't think that in some of the instances, I don't think that we could just put it all on the teachers. I think it also comes from the administrator. Absolutely. You lead from the top. You take your orders, or you lead from the top. And so
right.
That didn't make sense to me. That doesn't make sense to me. And you're right. Why couldn't they read the books? The students can read.
Right.
Right.
And
it's not like they couldn't.
And if they were struggling, let's just say, then what were the scaffolds that we would put in place to allow them to read those particular books? And, that's a whole nother topic around professional development that is fully implemented, right? That's one of the things that I find often we're asked to meet certain assessments. And because of that, that typically guides the way that, folks instruct.
Yes, yes.
So if you have to meet this assessment, a reading assessment, a math assessment, so then you lose sight of building these social emotional skills in class because you say you don't have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
Mm-hmm.
so and then we have to think about, well, how do we embed the learning, right? How do we embed that social emotional work into the things that we're doing to teach mathematical skills? And how do we embed mathematics into the reading curriculum? I was very, very big on thematic teaching because I believe that that was the best way to get the whole, to learn all of it, right? Because you will learn some things through in math that you're doing it just because you're learning social studies. And how do you embed those things? But there's a long way for us to go to get to the place where we need to be so that all children really are reaping the benefits of our public education system. Which brings me to the place of equity. So part of my background includes working with the Access, Equity, and Acceleration Unit. And a big push was about how do we help people to understand what it means to be equitable. Equity, to be clear, there is a difference between being equal and being equitable.
Absolutely.
So in my previous example, the books that we had, for me to say that all the students should have the ability to have access to those books, in some ways meant that I was thinking about there being some form of equal, that all children should have. The equity piece has to do with that scaffolding that I talk about, or those other additional things that may need to happen to make sure that particular students' needs are met, because we all have different needs. Right? And so it's important that we understand that there is a difference, and they're both important in the conversation. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome.
Right. Right. That's a lot. Right. So let's take a look at equity and being equitable regarding the hot topic of the day, which is affirmative action. And so, as you so eloquently stated, is that equality means that everyone gets the same treatment, the same chances, the same resources, etc. And so, when we focus on equality, the ultimate goal is fairness. Equity, that everyone gets what they need to exceed, and the ultimate goal for that would be justice.
Yes.
So the distinction is critically important because many of the arguments against racial justice initiatives use fairness as their underlying rationale. So, for example, some may argue that affirmative action isn't fair because it gives advantages to Black, Indigenous people of color, or BIPOC. I had to look that up. I'm like, BIPOC, ooh, what is that? So that's Black, Indigenous people of color that white people don't have. Well, of course, that in itself is another topic for another day.
Right.
Similar arguments are made against other social safety net programs that our government provides, like welfare, food stamps, Head Start preschool. You know, in many of these cases, these arguments explicitly are about race, even though surveys have shown that the biggest beneficiaries of these social safety net programs in our country are among white people. And so the Urban Institute in 2019 did a research, and among 59 people that they research, they identified 43% were white compared to 23% Black, 26% Hispanic, and 8% that were Asian or Native American. So really, the argument is grounded in an assumption that equality rather than equity should be society's goal. But what this assumption ignores is that there's a huge difference in between resources and treatments that already exist within the various racial groups within our country. So for everyone to have a true opportunity to succeed, we all need to acknowledge that we all start from different points on the track,
right?
you know, and we need to recognize what those different starting points are. They're not solely individual, but they can be related to categories of privilege or marginalization based on race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, and other types of aspects of identity. But only then can we begin to question and disrupt those systems that are responsible for creating and maintaining these differences. And so that, and so, excuse me. And in so doing, that's what we're working towards, equity. So equity and equality, just doing research on this topic that we're talking about today has been really interesting. And I do feel that people interchange the two. They really don't understand the two. And so obviously there's a whole lot more we could talk about this regarding equity and equality.
And I feel like, to what you said, I feel like a lot of what is happening with the bans on different things, banning the ability to read, certain books. I was just looking the other day where they were pulling certain children's books off of, they wouldn't let them, the mobile book van deliver these books, and they were telling them they had to pull those books, and one had to do with two penguins that were male penguins raising a child together. And so they wanted that one pulled. And it just makes me think that a big part of all of the banning really just, again, has to do with the fear of having to learn something different.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to now learn how to look at my own biases, think about why I'm, feeling a certain way about certain folks that have done nothing to me, and then, adjust myself accordingly. And I think that it's a difficult road to toe, but it's a necessary one. When working as an administrator in the Access and Equity Division, one of the things that we found was in terms of African American students, the numbers for those students identified as gifted and talented were very, very low. And so I'd have to ask myself, so why is that? Because I know that I've worked at schools where there were a large number of students who demonstrated the ability it demonstrated giftedness. And so we started looking at, there's a number of ways to identify students. It doesn't have to gifted doesn't mean that if I know one thing really well, that I'm this genius, or that I know everything very well. It means that there may be areas where I have gifts and talents, and in other areas I still may need to do some additional works.
Absolutely.
And so a part of my position was to help schools think about how to identify students. One of the categories is identification in terms of leadership. And then when they said, well, how do you identify those students? Well, the administrators and the teachers have to create portfolios. But in order to put something in the portfolio, you have to have something that helps to show that the student is able to lead, which means you have to put some things in place on your campus, elementary as well, that allows students to be leaders. And so many of our students may not fall into that category because we don't have the opportunities at our schools for students to demonstrate these abilities. And so one of the things that we created was a gifted academy where students could come and learn in a different way. We were not standing in front of the classroom with books and textbooks. We were doing hands-on learning and project-based learning. Students would have to demonstrate leadership by sharing what they learned, what the hypothesis was before they got to the end result, and then talking about what they could do differently as they continued on. And then we provided that as an opportunity for students to take that information and create a portfolio for themselves. And so this is a short example of what it means when we speak about providing spaces that are equitable.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that that is a perfect example of equality.
Yes, yes, yes. And one of the other things that there's a huge topic on the table right now when we talk about equity, you know, we have to talk about it all. And a huge topic on the table right now is the what is happening with our LGBTQ community. And I will say, as an equity warrior, I see and hear conversations, excuse me, as one that falls under being equitable and providing students with what they need to be successful. I will say, though, that there's more to it than just saying, okay, we have to do this. I believe that we have to put in structures in place to help make sure that we are providing our teachers, our staff, our administrators with the tools that they need to be able to lead this conversation or lead this agenda with fidelity. When we realize that conversations need to be had about treating people as human beings, because that's where I really think we have to get to, regardless of our differences, then we're able to better address all of these topics. But I believe that society is built on keeping groups of people down so that a few can win. There is enough room in this country for everyone to succeed, but our fears keep us from moving forward.
Yeah.
And I just believe that there's so much additional work, and it starts in other places. We have to really have serious trainings on biases and racism. And it has to be trainings that are not just, oh, here's a link, look at it on, on the screen. When you just click as you go, and then you're done and you've got your certificate. There has to be a real on, full blown out training that goes out to folks that helps to really get to the core of what is happening.
Yeah. And you and I have talked about this a lot, and I'm going to say this, and this might be a little controversial and maybe a topic for another time, but many of the ideas, notions, decisions, how we live our lives, is really rooted in religion. And so, I am a religious person, and I believe in God, and God is love. And so what I always ask is, I know what it says in the Bible, and that was a different time. But what do we do now? So we have students who are LGBTQ plus. And so what are we supposed to do? Just pretend like they don't exist? I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense that there's just this huge uproar, about, their sexual preference. Because this is the 21st century and we have to live within the 21st century. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Because like I said, that's a topic for another day.
But I want to add this one thing to what you just said. On top of that, at the end of the day, when you find the space to discriminate against one, you find the space to discriminate against all.
That's right.
There's always going to be something that you think that this group or that group or this group should do, should have, should get.
That's right.
And if they're not doing what I think that they should do, then they should not be able to get it. I mean, we're still also talking about voter suppression.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that? Why are we still suppressing people's rights to vote?
Yeah.
What is that based on? Well, we know what it is, but
here again, there's fear.
Exactly. So, it's just
it's just crazy. And so, I do agree that school districts have to provide professional development that goes beyond, like you say, watching a video or a one-day training. But I also have to say this: if a person is not willing to accept or believe what is being presented to them about biases, then that educator won't be able to really truly teach, I feel, that subject with fidelity, because they don't believe it themselves.
Right.
So, we're also talking about outing, asking teachers to out transgendered youth.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I don't believe that's the job of the teacher. Teachers have enough to do, with teaching the curriculum along with, social emotional learning. If you're in kindergarten, you're teaching the kids how to tie their shoes. I mean, in preschool, you're teaching the kids how to blow their nose. I mean, teachers just do a lot.
Yes.
But with this in particular, I do believe that that is not the teacher's job. Most school districts have social workers or, psych social workers, counselors. To me, that personnel would be more suited, because there are always going to be questions. So a teacher calls and says, Johnny is a girl now and he wants to go to the girls' restroom. She's calling the parent. Well, the parent has all kinds of questions she's asking the teacher. The teacher can't answer that. All she knows is, that he's changed genders. That's it. Teachers are not trained to really be counselors in that way. And so, if this is the way schools are going to go, then they're going to have to provide that training. And it's not something that you can just say, okay, starting in December, you're going to call parents and let them know. How are the teachers supposed to, what training are they going to have for it?
Right.
You know what I mean? You just can't make that decision.
Yes.
And so I just feel like this needs to be taken off the teacher's plate.
Yes, I agree. There's so many other things, and the day is short.
It is.
Really is.
The day is short. We're trying to get them to graduate.
Right.
That's
As my
Yeah.
pastor would say, it's tight, but it's right. And the reality is that the education system was not originally intended for everyone.
That's true.
In the 1600s, the 1700s, public education did not provide opportunities widely for those in specific regions, those with certain races, genders, or social class. It really was intended for the elite.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot that we have, as you had mentioned earlier, in terms of reform. There's a lot that we've been doing to try to reform the educational system.
Mm-hmm.
And as the reform movements in education have gone, continued to happen, I think we realize that equality, child-centered learning, and assessment of learners and their achievement as a measure of good teaching is what people were going after.
Mm-hmm.
And other revolutionary ideas such as inquiry-based practices, educating the whole child, and assuring educational opportunities for all persons may not necessarily have been available.
Mm-hmm.
So the greater emphasis on preparing teachers to serve the children of the public system has to be more than just those who are in the elite status.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the elites are the ones that own the businesses, but don't you want smart workers?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
And all
so,
the skills that you are learning, today in today's society, the sky's the limit. I can do what I want to do. I can be what I want to be. I don't have to just be a factory worker or an
mm-hmm.
office worker or even necessarily, college is great.
Mm-hmm.
But we know and we have seen that there are a lot of folks doing really great things who have not necessarily attended college.
Absolutely.
But if they had a really strong foundation in their K-12 experience or their pre-K-12 experience, then the sky is the limit, because they will have learned those things that we talked about today. They will have learned how to be good decision makers. They will have learned how to work with others. They will have learned how to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right. And part of that is having educators there to guide them, in making those good decisions, not making the decision for them, thinking, oh no, you need to go to a shop, or, go to career technical education because this is where your people belong. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's yes, it's about making good decisions and being able to have someone to help them choose. And
Right.
so in many of our school districts, those shifts are being made. However, we know that there are still some inequities, and that, even in our school district, there are many California distinguished schools, many California blue ribbon schools, but then there are several priority schools who have underperformed for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question has always been, what needs to be done to turn these schools around? Several attempts have been made with little to no result. So, that's just something to think about.
Right. And, you and I, we've been in the public education system for a good while. And we've seen many reform movements over the years, only to still be in the same place.
Yes.
Where we were, the same students who were at the bottom then are still at the bottom now.
Yes.
The same students who are doing great, or at least doing pretty good, are in the same place. And so we have to, as you mentioned, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we can do? And I think we have to ask ourselves what we can do individually and collectively to create a change for the trajectory of our students.
Yeah.
We bring all of this up to help each of us remind ourselves that it takes a community effort to adequately educate all children. And it takes people like Karen and I to share this information with you that we have acquired over the years to serve as a means to help historically underserved students with obtaining the knowledge, the skills, and the dispositions needed to thrive in school and beyond. And it is always my premise that when we do for the least, everybody else flourishes.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
So as a recap, to support social emotional development, classrooms and schools cannot operate as they have always done. Students must be explicitly taught the skills needed to demonstrate self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship building skills, and responsible decision-making, while providing students with equitable learning environments that are safe and nurturing, as these are key levers to exceptional schools.
Absolutely, absolutely. And exceptional schools can be had in every community, regardless of,
Yes.
economic levels. It just takes all of us working together to ensure that the needs of all of our students, all of our children are met in a way that's equitable, and that the school is providing equity amongst all of them. So I always want to leave with a quote. And so today, our quote is in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. And this is a quote from one of our esteemed Supreme Justices. And so she says, "Until we get equality in education, we will not have an equal society." That is so, so true.
Mhm.
This was from Supreme Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
So as we leave today, please remember to listen to us live on YouTube at Educational Dialogue, and or listen to our program wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to always like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, keep elevating the dialogue.